Hey guys, Graham here over at therecordingrevolution.com. Hope you're having a great day. I want to thank everyone real quick for checking out all these videos on YouTube and on the site and all your comments and questions. I've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys on what videos you want to see, what you want to learn about, what tutorials you'd like to see. So today's video is definitely by request by a lot of people, so not just one or two of you. I kept getting the same request, which is, how do you process your vocals, or how do you mix vocals, or what do you do to get your vocal sound? And that's such a subjective question, there's such a subjective answer to it. So what I'm going to do is show you how I do vocals once they're in the mix, once they're in the software. There's a million ways to process them, and it all depends on how you recorded them. So there's not just one fail-safe answer, but what I'll show you is what I do to a raw vocal, what I like to do, what kind of sounds I'm trying to achieve, and maybe that will give you some ideas depending on your material, the style of music you're playing, the way you recorded your tracks, but at least it'll give you a starting point to kind of make some decisions in your mixes. Okay, so let's jump into Pro Tools. We'll take a look at processing and mixing a vocal. Hope you enjoy. Alright, so here I am in my session, and I've got drums, bass, guitars, vocals, the whole works. But what I want to do is zero in here on the vocal track and just show you my process for getting them to fit into the mix and what kind of effects I use and how I route things, just to show you the theory behind what I do. The way you do it could look totally different, and you may not even like the sounds that I like. So you may want to process your vocals completely different, but this should be helpful to you nonetheless, okay? So what I want to do is, I've got a main vocal comp track here in the verses, as well as a vocal in the chorus and some harmonies, but I want to zero in on a verse just so we can look at it. So here it is in context.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. Must have been dreaming. I didn't hear you, take time to know you, try and obey you, yeah. Then I turn and listen to the stupid voice in my head.
So there you got a verse, and you got a dry vocal.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah.
Nothing on it, all right? But what I want to do is explain why you'd want to touch up a vocal or what you want to do with it, and then I'll just show you my process. And in this sense, I just need a couple things to happen on the vocal. One, I need a little bit of compression to kind of tame these peaks. And if you've watched the compression video I did last week, we went over this in detail while I was showing you how to work a compressor. But you can see that, you know, I peak here a little bit louder. So I want the volume of all my words to be very similar, at the same level, so you can hear every word, especially over all the other parts of the track. So the first thing I like to do is compress. But I will compress on the second slot here, and I'll show you why in a minute. I'll open a free slot, and I'll choose, you know, your basic compressor. And we looked at this one in the last week's video. And what I like to do is, and let's just start with it. We'll do a preset so you can see how easy this is.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. Must have been dreaming. I need to hear you, take time to know you, try and obey you, yeah. Then I turn and listen to the stupid voice in my head.
So I got a compressor. I chose Vocal Leveler, which is just a preset that's set a 3-to-1 ratio, which again is a great ratio for a vocal, and then a relatively slow attack and fast release. So it lets the vocal get in. It doesn't squash the vocal. It doesn't pinch off my words. And it's just going to compress or reduce the volume of some of my peaks, and then allow me to bump up my overall gain about 6 dB so I can have a consistent volume.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. Must have been dreaming. I need to hear you, take time to know you, try and obey you, yeah.
All right, it's real subtle. You're not going to hear much going on here, okay? But this is what I tend to do. I'll start with that, and as we get the mix going, if it needs more compression or if it needs some volume automation, I'll take it from there. But I start with compression just so I can hear the level a little bit better and I don't have to crank the volume above 0 because that's unnecessary for my taste. So The other thing you want to look at is an EQ, all right? Now, EQ is corrective in this case. I'm not necessarily going for a obvious effect, but I want to make sure that I'm bringing out the right frequencies in the vocal. And let me show you what I like to do. I tend to put the EQ before the compressor. That's why I left an open spot there. Only because if I'm doing any boosting on the EQ, it's going to make my track louder. And so then I want the compressor to include that in its signal. So I don't want to compress the track and then after the fact have boosting on the EQ. I just tend to work this way around with EQ first. So you don't just want to EQ for the sake of EQing, but I know that I don't need a lot of the low end on the vocal. And again, we've talked about this with a high pass filter if you watch the one song, 1 month challenge video. So I'm going to put a high pass filter to cut a lot of the lows out. And then I'm going to boost a little bit up here around 5K so there's more breathiness, more presence in the vocal. Let's take a listen.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. I need to hear you, take time to know you, try and obey you, yeah. Then I turn and listen to the stupid voice in my head. Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be, yeah. Well, I need to hear you, take time to know you, try and obey you, yeah.
So what I've done is just some simple, rolled off, right around 190 hertz, which is really high. Cut a lot of that out. And again, you're not going to notice that in the mix. And that's going to free up a lot of volume and headroom so my bass guitar and kick drum can rock it all day long. And then I've taken a cut here right around 1K just to remove some of the muddiness that happens to be in my voice. And I just know from mixing my voice a lot that in the end of the day, I just need, what is this? Like a dB, almost 2 dB cut, not much. And then about 2 dB, 2.5 dB shelf. So I'm boosting everything from 5K on just a little bit to give some air. So take a listen.
Thought I saw clearly how things were meant to be.
See how it sounds a little more kind of in a box?
Thought I saw clearly.
It just brings it out a little bit more, gives it some more presence, okay? And again, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but this is what I've come to realize I like to do on my tracks. Now, I will say this, depending on your microphone, again, there's so many different kinds of microphones, right? But at the end of the day, microphones tend to sound different mostly because they have their own EQ curve. They have, some are brighter, some are, a little more muddy, and that's a bad way to put it, but they're, you can have a AKG 414 or something like that I think can have a very bright sound at all times. Or a fantastic, really affordable microphone is the Behringer B1. I talk about it all the time. The Behringer B1 is a $100 microphone that has this boost right around 12K. It might even be closer to 7 or 8, but it has this scoop, this boost in its frequency response that always makes your vocals, especially if they're male vocals, have a little bit more presence to them when you're recording. So when I tend to record through that, I don't need to do too much boosting because it already makes my voice sound a little more present as opposed to, let's say, a Rode NT1A, I think. So again, it doesn't matter because hopefully you don't have a whole bunch of microphones you're trying to pick from. I hope you just have one microphone and you just don't worry about it and you just throw it up there, and whatever that sounds like with your voice or the vocalist's voice, you assess and say, well, it's plenty bright, I don't need a boost. Or it's a little, I need some more top end, maybe you'll boost a bit, or maybe you'll cut some, it's too bright. So this is just slightly corrective. We haven't done much, all right? Little compression, little EQ.